Evening, it's Alan Black. Thank you for coming. Actually, no one's come yet, so I just noticed, but when you sign on, whenever that is, thank you for signing on. I hope you get much out of the next 15 minutes or so. The focus today is on creative thinking styles based on thinking style instruments. You can use many different ones that exist. I created this one that spells out the word mind as the sign behind me to represent four primary ways in which people approach thinking and learning, solving problems, leading, and just about every other activity human beings actually take part in. Highly logical people do things one way. Highly imaginative people do things another way. Highly emotional people, once again, and then highly systematic or tradition-focused people have their ways. That's the basic principle behind it. In the book, and I will gladly send you the chapter if you write to me, at Alan, A-L-A-N, at creating, C-R-E, the number 8, ng.com, or look me up in Google as Robert Alan Black, and that's A-L-A-N. But in the chapter, you'll see this basic thing, and I've encouraged you in my other videos to go to my website for the mind design and actually fill out the questionnaire. Well, let's do it a simpler way. I'm going to show you these four shapes, and I'm asking you to put them in order of your liking them or disliking them, however you approach to do that, as if you were going to choose one to be a logo, a symbol for you. Whether it's a square, a squiggle, a circle, or a triangle. How would you put those in order? 3 of those are the basic geometric shapes, and then one free form. I'll pause for about 30 seconds, give you a chance. This is a first reaction. Which of those 4 would you choose? Then which would you choose second, third, and fourth? And put them in order. I've used this one for many years. Unfortunately, I've never found who actually created it. The earliest record I can find is sometime in the 50s. It reappeared in the 70s, which is when I first got involved and first experienced it with a trainer. There is another one called the 5 shapes, which goes into more personality than in thinking. And that came later. All right, what are some of the basics? If you chose a square, there's a good chance you tend to be more rational, logical, analytical, and tend to be an individual thinker. If you chose a squiggle, you tend to be more intuitive, more exploratory. A lot of your ideas come from the unknown. You may explore and discover where they're coming from, but they may come to you instinctively. And also you have a tendency to be fanciful at times. If you chose a circle, quite often fun is a key issue for you. Being harmonious with other people, you intend to involve other people. You approach working with other people like a family or a team. If you chose a triangle, tend to be more systematic, prefer to work with proven answers, equations, step-by-step, or tradition. Now, no one is really one of those, but people have a tendency, the greatest majority that I've explored in the last 30 to 40 years, about 2/3 of people tend to favor 1 or 2 of those. One more predominantly than the other. And then the others come in a different ranking. A small percentage, less than the 6 or 16%, will favor only one or all four. Now, how do these people see themselves? All right, now we use the same principles. The squares have a tendency to see themselves as very precise. They prefer things to be precise. I'm going to read from this instead of playing Vanna White. They tend to be very thorough thinkers, rational, and as I said before, very focused. More often than not, people will label the intuitive types as creative, risk takers, challengers, innovative. In reality, my experience since the 70s, when I first became aware of these kinds of tests, is that everyone has the potential of being creative, but we think differently and we create differently. In the case of the circles, again, tend to be very friendly. They're the people that put out their hand first to say hello, tend to be smiling most of the time, tend to be very caring and sensitive and easy to be with, as well as being very giving. As far as the triangles, they tend to be very reliable, orderly, consistent, loyal, accurate, and right, and highly dependable. Now we can translate these traits into physical characteristics, the way people dress, the way they speak, the way they lay out their desk or their workspaces. You can spot the extremes for sure. Now, people who are a strong mix of two, that's a little harder to determine. Now, what I've discovered, though the use of the shapes exercise, which is a very simple one you can do on an elevator speech or just casually talking to someone, but you get someone to take an actual questionnaire, whether it's 9 questions, 20 questions, 120, or over 200 questions, you can get more and more accurate, more precise. What I've discovered in workshops over the years is more often than not, when I don't feel I have the 10 or 15 minutes to have people fill out the mind design questionnaire itself, the short one, I will use the shapes. Then I will make mental notes or even notes in my journal as I'm working with the people during the day or the week and watch for traits. Are the way they act, the way they do things, the way they speak, matching the other clues? And then when I have them take the mind design and come up with their 4 scores, as you will get if you go to my website and take the actual questionnaire, then I compare that to what I've seen already in the first couple hours. Now, some of the issues, though, unfortunately, that I've discovered, if you don't match someone else, that's where the problems start coming in. And my intuitive took over more than my rational, and I've misplaced the slide. All right. I'll do it this way instead, like a workshop. Each of these, one exercise I learned from Ned Herman and a few others many years ago was with questionnaires like this, have people physically experience what the group is like by having them go stand in corners that represent their strongest or their major preference or focus. For instance, I might have all the squares go to the corner and match M because that basically are the same. The squiggles, circles, the N, triangles for D, and I have them go stand in the corners. And then I have them talk to each other about what might they have in common. Then I have them go to the corner that matches their least favorite choice. In my case, that would generally be the triangle. So I stood here originally, talked to those people. Then I go to the next stage and I stand here. And we talk about, well, what is it about that we don't like? What is it that we might be weak in? Or maybe we just refuse to be like that. Well, various ways we can phrase the questions. Then I go back again, and now we talk about what we learned from it. Because chances are, that group of 6 or so, they're not usually the largest group unless it's a specific occupation. Like all architectural designers have a tendency to be here. Kindergarten teachers tend to be here. And I stress the word tend because it varies part of the country, the age, type of school, whether it's private or public school. But when we split up to go to our least favorite, we will probably spread around the room. That's when I started learning about differences between them. People in the corners, people that pretty much match each other, what I call coinciding. They coincide in their preferences, tend to not have much trouble working with each other when it has to do with the thinking process and problem-solving process or communicating. But when other issues come up, behavior, patterns, education, interest in money, and various other aspects of our personalities are fairly complex. That's when we start to see problems. But now if I mix people on the left side or the right side and make a team out of them or a team out of them, I will start seeing problems. This is what I call complementing either side. They may have trouble up to 25%. Here it's up to maybe 10, depending on how unique the other aspects of their personalities are. Where the problems start to really multiply is across, or what I call contrast. That can lead up to 50% from the experiences I've had over the last several years since I created this one. And then finally, contradicting. That can get up to 75% or almost all the time. Now, once people get to know each other, once people start to accept that there are at least 4 different, if not 24 different or infinite types of preferences for how we think, how we create, how we lead, how we follow, and all the other human activities, then those issues of 10%, 25, 50, and 75 come down because we learn to accept each other more. I'm going to pause for a minute. Hello, Anthony. Hi, Dale. Good to see you. It's been a while. Hope things are doing well where you are. And Danny, thank you again for joining. I want to touch on a couple things that I've learned using this idea of using a system for creative thinking. One is M's tend to be innovators. They tend to take what exists and make it better. Doesn't mean that they don't occasionally come up with brand new ideas in pure science or pure engineering research. But I label them that because they are continuously improving. They are never satisfied. Perfect does not exist. They keep going for better. In the case of the intuitive, I use the word imagination because that's what they use a great deal of the time. They like to create the new. They like to do the untried. They tend to be the blue sky type of people. And also inspirational. They will rely on hunches and guesses, where the meditative will not. Negotiative tend to be people who explore and discover things while they're doing it, often accidental. Generally feels a problem and its many potential solutions. Generally, this style prefers to work in teams to bounce ideas off of each other. Even the character House didn't like to work alone. Even though he was extremely high here from all the evidence, all the things that they showed in the years of that program, this definitely was strong. This was definitely his weakest area, and he definitely resisted this. But he found he needed other people. He needed to hear ideas. He needed to see them. They needed to be outside of his brain often. And then the highly structured people, or people who prefer structure, they like to use known theories. They like to use design thinking approaches or the creative problem solving models, the many that there are, specifically the one that Alex Osborne and Sid Parnes came up with. It's called the CPS process. Another thing I discovered exploring this thinking is that we have the potential of being able to do any one of them or all four. But something about the way we are when we're born, there's some degree of this. You can see it in, if you have more than 2 children, by the age that the second one, the youngest one, is 11 months old, you can start seeing differences in the way they do things, which may or may not be lifelong. But what I've seen, way of looking at, these are 4 selves that we can choose from. We may discover, like in my case, this is extremely high in every test I've ever filled out. This is generally also high. This is moderate. This tends to be low. But I can do the kinds of things that these people like to do. It's just not something I prefer to do. But I can talk about 4 selves. The problem-finding self. You want to find out what the problem is, give it to a bunch of logical people, or M's as I call them, or squares. They analyze, they investigate, they innovate, they improve, they experiment, and they base it all on logic and facts. And they love to challenge you. Another self is the idea-finding self. The highly intuitive people love to synthesize ideas. They love to use their intuition and strive to be creative, explore many ways, and as it says, hunches, and tend to be very visionary. People who prefer to work in teams or feel like a family, in fact, that word family comes up a lot in their dialogue. If you analyze their speaking patterns like NLP people do, you'll sense that they feel and sense ideas. They play with data. When they say over 60%, that meant more than 50. Does not necessarily mean 64. The other self, the implementing self, they also can be creative, but they want to use formulas. They want data that they can verify. They want to use procedures, and they prefer to be systematic, work within deadlines, work within budgets, and they tend to be very evaluative. They all possess negatives. That's a challenge for all of us. And one of the ways I've discovered, until we get to know each other and accept that there are at least 4 or 8 or 12 or 24 different possible ways that people can approach the way they think, is that meditatives look at intuitive. Well, I'm going to say we're all going to look at intuitives, the ones that the world tends to generically call or stereotypically call the creative ones. The meditatives have a tendency to look at them as out in space with no facts or proof, out of touch with reality. Until they get to know them, until they start to see what it is about them that interests them. Intuitives, of course, they see themselves as creative risk takers and so forth. Quite often, a lot of intuitives don't think of what they do as a risk. They say, well, that's just another way to do it. If that doesn't work, I'll try something else. But negotiatives who supposedly complement them or coincide and complement them still see negatives. They see them as too far out, a little crazy, and too independent. They like to go for our idea. They're looking for lots of ideas. These people grab one of the early ideas that they generate and try to get the team to commit to it. This one's still working on more ideas. They haven't stopped. And then the directives, of course, who contradict the intuitives, see these people as highly flighty, break all the rules, unreliable, egotistical at times, and not a company person. Now, I'm going to go one more step. And, this will teach me. Aha, there we go. I found my missing slides. I've also used this with regards to leadership and training and every other subject I've taught. And as Dale knows, he's seen me do this several times. And he's probably seen me do what I'm doing now, and that's not finding the image I'm looking for. Oh, well. Sample leaders. Walt Disney, no question in my mind. Mother Teresa, no question in my mind. Highly structured leaders, and they're not necessarily negative. In the early years, I used to use Hitler. That was an extreme mistake on my part, because that was the negative. Each one of these can be extremely negative or positive. But what can you do with your natural creativeness? Well, become aware of what might be your styles. Use the shapes. Look at those. Go to my website. Type in the survey box or search box, shapes. Or go on Google and just write 4 shapes and read some of the things you find there. Accept that you may have one, a specific preference. Focus on strengthening it. Rather than spending time weakening, I'm better off strengthening this and this than I am trying to correct the weaknesses I may have here. Learn to accept other styles. That's one of the first points, and expand it. So one last thing I'm going to do, seeing I can't seem to find the missing slide. Nope, I can't. Is 1, accept, don't reject. Understand rather than misunderstand. Benefit from rather than avoid. Strengthen rather than challenge. Maximize rather than change. Team instead of object to or reject. Because the ultimate goal, as I've discovered when I did studies with companies, to find out which of the more effective companies, more successful companies using a variety of variables, what was the makeup? And what I found was the makeup was generally a mix. If one of these was specifically missing, there was usually a problem. And I did find the missing slide. It was Thomas Jefferson, highly logical until after his wife passed away and he moved to Paris for a while. If you see Jefferson in Paris, you'll see a whole different man than you see before that. Genghis Khan, which, depending on your perspective, could be seen as a very negative. But this graphic, which you quite often see on Facebook, these beautifully done humanoid graphics, is we really need to team together. We need to maximize what we need at a particular moment. Ideas, we need to maximize this. Analyze them and look at the problems and make sure that these ideas are really helping problems here. We need to be able to sell it. We also need to be able to structure it and put a plan together and deadlines. We need at least some of each in different stages of working on a problem. Let's see, we picked up John. Hi, John and Edward. Glad you joined me. Hope you found something of value. Please write to me if you want the material that I used in this. It's easy, just alan@creating.com. Until tomorrow evening, when I go on to chapter 7. Bye-bye.